We'll call the meeting to order. This is the Hastings Planning Commission. Today's date is October 24th. This is a regular meeting. First item on the agenda would be approval of minutes from our meeting on September 26th. Any corrections or clarifications? Motion for approval. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Second by Alpa. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Those stand approved. We have no public hearings tonight, but we do have variance number 2016-42 floodplain fill setback at 803 First Street East. Mr. Fortney.
Thank you very much. There was a home on this lot that was demolished by a previous homeowner back in 2010. This is a picture from that time period. All the structures located in the 100-year floodplain must be elevated so the lowest floor elevation is at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation. In this location, that's 693 feet above sea level. They used, fill used for the elevation must extend beyond the base of the structure at least 15 feet in all directions outside the structure. I discussed the origin of this with the DNR, and they said that generally it's to maintain an adjacent area to the structure for removal of flood victims in case of unexpected flood. They said they see this type of variance quite often on infill lots, given the wide setback required to maintain 15 feet just of fill on each side of the house. They said they generally don't have an issue with it as long as there's at least one side maintained of the 15-foot setback of fill, and both the front and the rear house will meet that requirement. This is an aerial picture of the property. The construction plans have been reviewed by the Building Safety Department, and they don't see any issues with it or the fill or retaining wall on the site, as the concrete foundation will be going down 42 inches and likely into the bedrock. This is an illustration from the DNR showing a typical variance case for a flood fill example. In their literature, it identifies an example nearly identical to our current situation that's proposed. The red line on here would be the base flood elevation, and the blue line is the regulatory flood protection elevation, which is also just means 1 foot above base flood elevation. In the picture on this side, they're showing how the 15-foot setback of fill would work. The fill would have to be at least to the base flood elevation before the 15 feet. And on the other side, it shows only having 10 feet before they would go lower than that. This is an updated survey. I provided one on the DS for the Planning Commission. It shows the retaining wall on the west side, which could be as high as 4 feet in the rear. The east side shows a very small difference in elevation, but includes a notation that drainage swale must be graded between the properties to assure that drainage flows to the north and to the south and not over the side property line onto the existing homeowner's property. There's a couple of photographs from the site. This one's taken from the back of the site looking forward. You can see there's a lot of, it's hard to see in the picture, but there's a lot of stakes showing different things. Some of them are showing the house and the property lines and some elevations. But a variance is a permitted departure from an ordinance requirement for a particular piece of property. A variance is generally a dimensional standard, like a setback or a height limit that's being varied. A variance can be granted by state statute if enforcement of a zoning provision causes the landowner practical difficulties. To show this, there are 3 statutory tests that must also be in harmony with the general intent of the ordinance and consistent with the comprehensive plan. The first is that the proposal places the property into use in a reasonable manner. Staff believes this is true because it's reasonable to allow a structure on this lot, as there's ample protection and accessible loading area on both the front and the rear of the structure. The second is that unique circumstances of the property were not created by the landowner. Staff finds that the unique circumstances of the floodplain, low lot elevation, and low neighboring lot elevations were in existence prior to the applicant's ownership of the lot. And the third is that the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality. Staff believes that the lot is located in a developed area and in the presence of many other structures, and is even replacing a long-standing structure on the site. The fill in the front and rear will be feathered into the landscape to appear fairly natural from the Mississippi River and the streetscape. The variance is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance, given that the protection of the structure in the floodplain and safety of the public is the purpose of the requirement. The fill extends 3 to 4 feet from the structure on the sides and a full 15 feet on the front and rear, giving the foundation plenty of structure support coupled with the 42-inch deep concrete footings. Additionally, there would be ample area around the structure for emergency crews to load and unload if necessary. And finally, staff believes the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The site is not identified as a natural area, wetland, floodplain, or otherwise protected area development. The plan has identified this and the surrounding area as low-density residential. Neighboring owners within 350 feet were notified of the request, and we received 2 calls for additional information. One of them wanted to just assure that there wouldn't be additional drainage directed to their property to the east. The Assistant City Engineer said they review certified surveys for these types of issues in all projects in the city. And the project engineer was directed to make some amendments to that plan to address that type of concern. Those changes are reflected in your certified survey that I provided tonight. The Minnesota DNR is notified of the proposed variance as required, with no official comments being received, which is typical from the DNR in cases like this. With that, I can answer any questions. Also, the applicant is here.
All right, thank you, Justin. All right, Commission, this is before you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Slayton.
not having received a packet tonight, I did look at this. I know the lot because I thought about buying that myself a couple years ago, and it was going to need a whole lot of fill to bring that up to snuff. Now, the question is the retaining wall. Are they doing 3 sides on that retaining wall to keep everything away from the neighbors, where they're concerned about the water sloping off the fill where the house has to sit? And that seems to be the major concern over there.
Well, the retaining wall is going to be on the west side. If you look at the certified survey, it's that long gray.
Could you bring that back up again?
This shown here, this long gray item is the retaining wall. This is the side of the property that requires the most fill, and there's just not enough room to do that with a slope that would be manageable to maintain its shape and care of that. On this other side where the neighbors were concerned, there's only maybe 2 feet at max at the biggest elevation difference, I think, which can be maintained by sloping down and just having a very small swale along the property line.
How are they going to build the retaining wall to the west? Is that going to be a poured wall, or is that going to be block that's problematic when it starts flooding?
I'm not sure. The applicant's here. He may have some idea of what the construction type of that wall would be. Along the north and the south, so on the front and the back of the house, that would just be a long grade. That would just grade down to the current lot elevation.
Okay, thank you. And what type of fill? Are we filling back up with rock in this area so it's got the good drainage versus what's going to slough off?
I'm not sure. It would just be whatever they think that would compact well to build a structure on.
Okay.
As I was looking at this, with these ones, it sounds to me like the neighbors are being taken care of, and I think that's one of our big concerns. I also look, excuse me, I look at these as, the property owner knows what they're getting into. They're building on a river. So then I look to, who else can be impacted, and I I like that we've mentioned several times the emergency crews. Do we have any, we had feedback from the DNR, but do we have any feedback from like our local emergency services if they felt like this would be an ample landing space to get in and out of there, or?
No, we haven't gotten any.
But we give that buffer that they're asking for essentially in the front and rear. Okay. So from that regard, I feel like all parties have pretty well been represented here, but.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Johnson.
how much fill, isn't there regulation for placing fill in the floodplain?
Well, we have a requirement that any fill being brought in would have to be reviewed. If it's part of a building plan for a house, it's done during that time. So since it's part of a comprehensive application for building a structure, it's reviewed by the engineering department from that standpoint.
And I guess what I'm thinking of is the lost volume within that floodplain because of the fill. You know, we're talking about addressing the neighbors. What about the guys downriver that now get a higher water elevation? That's what I'm getting at.
Well, yeah, as far as I know, that's a concern in the floodway, which is the more restrictive flood zone behind the property. That's where the floodwaters actually flow, and so when those areas are impacted, has the biggest impact on anyone else in the area. So anytime any fill is added in the floodway, it has to be reviewed.
Okay, so
special use
beyond,
permit.
above the floodway elevation to the 100-year flood, there isn't really mitigation required as far as fill in the floodplain?
Yeah, correct. That's my understanding.
That's correct, okay. Do we know what kind of volume of dirt is going to be placed in here?
I don't know. The applicant might know how many cubic yards or anything that might be
Cubic?
estimated. Yeah.
Could you step up? That'd be great.
The one quote that I got from a excavating contractor said 25 truckloads. I don't know anything about that, how many tons that is or whatever. In the material, two of the quotes that I got from excavating contractors both said sand. So sand must be the most easily accessible for them.
Okay.
And then as far as the retaining wall, it's, you know, I just got a quote from a landscape contractor just to do block, and I don't know how that will withstand a flood. I could ask the excavating contractor to make sure that it would do that, but.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Slayton.
I'd be inclined to be very careful of that wall that's being built with any flood water that's going to wash out. Speaking from experience, concrete block fills up with water in the winter and it bursts out. When it soaks in an area like that. So I'd be very leery about that. Justin, do we know when the original house was put in there? And I would assume it predates the dam.
1860.
So it well predates the dam, and anything in this area, problems were caused by the dam and the rising water at that point in time, not by the property, not by the previous owners.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant since he's standing there? All right, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Any other discussion on this one? If there's no other discussion, a motion may be in order.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for approval of variance number 2016-42 for floodplain fill setback at 803 First Street East.
We have a motion to recommend approval by Slayton. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alpa. Any discussion on that motion before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Point of clarification, will that, with the members present, that'll pass, correct?
Yes,
All
that's
right.
adequate, thank you.
All right, the motion prevails then. All righty, then we will go on to other business.
It's another business, we had well, this item here would go forward to the city council at their regular meeting coming up on November 7th. At the last meeting of the city council on the 17th of October, had a couple of items, one of them being a rezoning for property on Ramsey Street. I think it's 313 Ramsey Street, Harold Hoban, that was before you a few weeks ago. We did have one resident, Jason, that spoke in opposition to the project. The city council ultimately did vote unanimously to deny the rezoning request. I think some of the issues that came forward during, I think some of the issues that came forward during the presentation included concerns about having a new commercial use within that neighborhood, and concern of parking and impact on residential home values. That seemed to be the predominant course of the discussion on that one. So the council did deny that request. They are bringing it back on November 7th to approve the findings of fact necessary to support the denial. So that will be on the city council agenda for the 7th, but at this point, it is scheduled to be on there to adopt the resolution of the findings of fact for the denial on that. So in discussions with the property owner, it appears that he is going to just look at selling the property as a strictly residential property at this point. Also on that meeting, we had a part of a vacation of easement request for the art space project. That project has closed. We are no longer the owner of the front part of that block. That project should be under construction here in the next week. You'll be seeing activity out there. So about a one-year project timeframe for construction of that. Again, 37 units, 3-story building with some commercial. So looking forward to that coming along. We also closed recently on the Alina project to build the medical office building west of town on Highway 55. That's another project which staging should start very shortly on that one. So those two projects will be starting this fall, trying to get in before the weather changes on us. Also at the meeting, we had a approval of the special use permit for Zayo. They were looking to place the fiber optic utility line underneath the Mississippi River. City council did table that at the initial meeting, looking for more information. Zayo wasn't present at the first meeting. Did hold a planning committee meeting, or utility committee meeting, and discussed that with Zayo, felt comfortable about the project, and ultimately the full council voted to support that. So that's another project that'll be going forward here. And looking at our schedule here, it's a 5-Monday month, so we won't have our regular meeting for another 3 weeks. That'll be coming up on November 14th. We may have one plat coming forward at that point. We're finalizing details for that at this time. And then we also will be following up at our next meeting with further discussion on the original Hastings design standards. So that's all I had for tonight.
All right, thank you, John. Commissioners, any other business from the commission here? Seeing none, motion to adjourn may be in order.
So moved?
Motion by Johnson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Slayton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. We are adjourned.